Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Groundwork Ohio's August webinar. Today's webinar will be focused on housing insecurity among young children. I'm Brittany Bolton, I'm Groundwork's Vice President, and I'm really excited about our panel today. I'll introduce them momentarily, but I just wanted to share we have a lot of new faces in the chat or in the attendee list, I think. So Groundwork Ohio, we're a 501c3 nonprofit. We're a nonpartisan statewide organization, and we are wholly committed to making Ohio the best place to be a young child. We work with stakeholders around the state, from early childhood educators to business leaders to hospital systems and mental health professionals, everyone who touches the life of a young child. And we just wrapped up a 14-stop roadshow tour around the state, hearing about the greatest needs. And one of the issues that popped up at every single spot was housing affordability. So we're really thrilled to bring together these wonderful experts. We have on the line today Sarah Vrabic, who is the Early Childhood Senior Program Manager at SchoolHouse Connection. Sarah is going to give us a national perspective on data trends we're seeing in this space, and she'll be presenting first. Then we'll take it to a statewide perspective from Amanda Wilson, who's the Youth Housing Initiative Director at the Coalition on Homelessness and Housing in Ohio. And we'll finish our conversation with Christina Walls, who's the Managing Director of Education at YWCA Columbus, and she'll give us some really practical and programmatic examples of interventions that they're doing to really press this growing crisis. Quick note on housekeeping, we are recording. I believe a transcript is being generated as well. If you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We are going to have a little bit of time at the end, so also feel free to sit on questions and we'll have a little bit of a discussion at the end of the conversation. Before we kick it off, I hope you really enjoy the event today and want to continue learning with Groundwork. So I'll put in a brief plug for our September 26th Building Momentum event, where we will gather all day here in Columbus in person and do a bit of an advocacy training boot camp with some really great sessions around communications and Ohio's political landscape going into the state biennial budget process next calendar year. So we would love to invite all of our attendees to come and join in on that learning opportunity. So I'm going to pause here and we are going to start just diving right in with Sarah. So Sarah will take over camera and slide control, and then we'll pivot to Amanda. I'll do an transition at that point. But Sarah, if you would like to start, I'll let you give your brief bio. I think that's a little bit more organic than me reading the paragraph. Sometimes sounds kind of stale before you kick it off into your presentation.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Good morning,
Sarah.
everyone. Good morning. I'm Sarah Vrabic. I'm the Early Childhood Senior Program Manager at SchoolHouse Connection, and I'm very happy to be with you all today and my fabulous co-presenters. Just a little bit about me. Prior to my time at SchoolHouse, I worked within the Family Emergency Shelter System of Philadelphia for about 10 years. I'm doing a lot of cross-systems collaboration between the homeless housing system and the early childhood system, and renovating shelter environments to make them more child-friendly and conducive to healthy child development. And now I'm at SchoolHouse with a national focus on infants and toddlers experiencing homelessness, identifying them, and getting them connected to high-quality early childhood development programs. So I'm very happy to be with you all today. I am going to share my screen. Give me one moment. And we will get started. Okay, can everyone see the slides?
Looks great.
Okay, fantastic. All right, let's dive right in. So a little bit about SchoolHouse Connection. We are a national nonprofit, and we provide strategic advocacy and practical assistance, partnering with early childhood programs, schools, institutions of higher ed, families, and youth, all with the mission of working to overcome homelessness through education. And I encourage you all to check out our website and to sign up for our newsletter, so you can stay up to date on all of our latest work, all of our federal and state policy advocacy. We have all of our archived webinars on our website, and you can register for upcoming webinars. We do webinars frequently, so you can check that out to learn about a new resource to keep up with your professional development. Also on our website, we have a ton of tools and resources that are pertinent to your work. And we post all of the questions and answers that we receive. So if you are working with a family experiencing homelessness and you have a question or a challenge, chances are that someone in another community has had a similar challenge or question. So that's a great resource as well. And then we also have our network of youth scholars that we are extremely proud of. We support them through case management and through financial scholarship on their collegiate journeys. So if you're working with a high school student who has experienced homelessness or who is experiencing homelessness, please check out that program on our website as well, because that might also be a great resource. So I am going to try to move through everything pretty quickly today. So I'll do a little bit of background on homelessness in early childhood, some national data, a little bit of state data, and then some recommendations for action. But all the slides will be shared with you, and we'll have time for question and answer at the end. So like I said, I'll probably be moving pretty quickly. So when we have conversations like this, we always like to start by grounding ourselves in the McKinney-Vento definition of homelessness, which defines homelessness for children and youth as lacking a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. And as you can see on the slide, this can look like a number of different circumstances, whether staying in shelters with their family, staying in motels or hotels, in substandard housing, staying in their car, and notably sharing the housing of others due to loss of housing, economic hardship, or a similar reason. And often you'll hear this circumstance of homelessness referred to as doubled up. And at SchoolHouse, we refer to this population as hidden homelessness, because typically across communities, you're not seeing this population of families highly visible, which can make it even harder to identify them and get them connected to the services and supports that they need and deserve. But we know that actually in the United States, this is the majority of families experiencing homelessness, those who are sharing the housing of others. And if this is a population that you would like to learn more about, we encourage you to check out this recently published New York Times article. They did a really good job showcasing this population and their everyday struggles and challenges. Families will often stay with others temporarily for a number of different reasons, and it can vary community to community. There may not be shelter availability within that community. A family may fear that their children will be removed from their custody due to identifying as experiencing homelessness. And often this can put a young child and their family in vulnerable conditions and potentially harmful environments. And we know that many families who are sharing the housing of others, it is an overcrowded situation. And this has the potential to lead to developmental delays, particularly for our youngest children in these circumstances. Last year, the Department of Housing and Urban Development reported a 16% increase in families staying in shelters, and that was just in 2023. And knowing that the majority of families experiencing homelessness are sharing the housing of others and not in these shelters, we know that the actual accurate increase in the number of families experiencing homelessness is much greater than the 16% figure. And earlier this year, we partnered with the Eviction Lab through Princeton University, and they have recent research showing that the age group at greatest risk of eviction are babies, and they're followed only by children under the age of 5. So you are most likely to be evicted as a young child in this country, and you're most likely to be experiencing homelessness and seeking shelter services in this country as an infant, in fact. And I'm sure that everyone on this call is well aware that homelessness in early childhood can have serious consequences. It has the potential to lead to developmental delays, to negative health outcomes, and it can impact children's school readiness. And actually, it can impact their school readiness even after they are stably housed. A significant piece of evidence we have of this academic impact is that the high school graduation rate for students experiencing homelessness is 68%, compared to 85% for all other students. High school students who are experiencing homelessness are also 10 times more likely to become pregnant or to get someone pregnant. And the literature also shows us that high school students who have previously experienced homelessness, even those who are not currently, they are at significant risk for mental health problems as well. And so it's just important to note that providing housing without additional supportive services can actually increase the likelihood that children will experience homelessness again later in life. So it's so critical for us to think about not only providing more adequate, affordable housing for our families, but also those really critical wraparound supports and services, especially access to education. And so when we're thinking about providing those services, it's also important to note that this population of families, they encounter barriers to access. Typically, they're highly mobile. They may not have reliable access to transportation. They may not have those usually necessary documents on hand, excuse me, that you would need to enroll. And there also might be a lack of awareness within their community of the providers of the best ways to reach these families. So I just wanted to quickly note that there are many early childhood development programs that have prioritizations for both identification and enrollment for children experiencing homelessness. I'm so sorry. I'm getting a tickle in my throat. And so I won't go through all of these in detail, but I encourage you to explore them in your own time. Notably that early Head Start and Head Start programs, families experiencing homelessness are categorically eligible for these programs. And I also wanted to note that home visiting programs can be a good resource for this population, especially if families have experienced a traumatic event that, I'm sorry, that may lead to their experience of homelessness. Often they want to keep their children close. They might be hesitant in enrolling them in a program, but many home visiting programs will provide their services in a flexible manner, meeting families in libraries and parks so that those children can still receive that education and that programming to foster healthy development, but it's in a flexible way that works best for the family. So now I will move into some data. We know through our analyses that there are approximately 600,000 children under age 6 experiencing homelessness in the United States. And just over 20% of those children are identified and served by an early childhood program, meaning around 80% of those children are not identified or enrolled in an early childhood program. And when we break it down further and look at that critical population of infants and toddlers, we know that there are an estimated 364,390 infants and toddlers experiencing homelessness in the United States, and only 11% of them are identified and served by an early childhood program. And for the purposes of our analyses, this includes early Head Start, home visiting, and those children who are identified and served by their local education agency. So that means that just about 90% of infants and toddlers experiencing homelessness in the United States are not identified or served by a program. And this is what really keeps us up at night. So we must work together to better identify and enroll these children. I'm going to just kind of show these slides because I know we have a lot that we want to get to today. So this is just some enrollment rates for children birth through age 6. And for those, again, birth through age 3 in home visiting, in early Head Start, and in LEA programs. And then I know there's a lot on this slide. This is Ohio's data profile through analyses that we did with Poverty Solutions at the University of Michigan. And I wanted to note that the majority of students pre-K through 12 experiencing homelessness in Ohio are actually doubled up and staying with others. So this is important, and my cat is making an appearance as well. This is important to note when we think about policies for better identifying and serving students experiencing homelessness. You know in your state that the majority of them are sharing the housing of others. And for infants and toddlers, this is Ohio's data profile. And I know that Amanda is going to go through this data in a little bit greater detail, but I wanted to show it. This is part of our 50 state analysis that we did for infants and toddlers experiencing homelessness. And you can see that about 80% of them in Ohio are not identified or served. And Ohio has 7,660 infants and toddlers experiencing homelessness. In the bottom right corner, you can see the breakdown of their enrollment rates in home visiting, early Head Start, and those participating in an LEA program. And you can also see in the bottom left, we do this for every single state, whether that state has certain policies in place to prioritize the identification and enrollment of children experiencing homelessness. So Ohio does waive co-payments for parents, and it provides a 90-day grace period to provide that enrollment documentation and those immunization records. So that's fantastic. Those are fantastic ways to remove barriers to access. You can also see that children experiencing homelessness are not prioritized for childcare subsidy in Ohio. They don't have streamlined eligibility, and parents are not exempt from work requirements. So when we think about next steps for policy and advocacy, thinking about these different prioritizations and policies is a really great kind of first step to take. Okay, now I will briefly move into some ideas for action. And one of them is simply what we're doing here today, talking about this population of young children experiencing homelessness, how it impacts families, and what we can do together to partner to better identify and serve this population. Of course, improving data collection is always critical, and advocating for the removal of barriers. And I wanted to mention that Ohio did use its ARP HCY funds to partner with their Head Start Collaboration Office, specifically with the purpose of increasing the identification of young children experiencing homelessness and increasing their enrollment in Head Start programs. So that is a great use of those funds and a great way to better serve this population. I also wanted to showcase that earlier this year, we published case studies of innovative programs that both identify and support expectant parents, infants, and toddlers experiencing homelessness. And so I encourage you to explore these case studies because there might be ideas in there for you to replicate within your community. One, I wanted to mention Home Visiting for Homeless Families is a program in the Chicago area, and they are specifically home visiting programs that are tailored to serve families experiencing homelessness. So whether they have home visitors who, the only people on their caseload are families experiencing homelessness, or they have a home visiting program that is contracted to work with multiple emergency shelters in the community. That is a really great program to kind of think about ideas for different service models. And so I listed some other programs as well, and I linked to their case study and to their website if you'd like to learn more about them. And we will have a second round of case studies being published within the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned for those. One other program I wanted to highlight because I think it's possible for other communities to replicate is the Student Age Parent Program out of Beloit, Wisconsin. So their school district partnered with their local Head Start to remove barriers to access for high school students experiencing homelessness who are parenting youth who have young children. And that program will be highlighted in our upcoming case studies to be published soon. So that is a great way to remove barriers to both young children experiencing homelessness, receiving an education, and their parenting youth. So here are some additional resources to continue your education. Again, if you have questions, these are a great place to start. And then please connect with us. Here are all of our platforms, and we have a Slack community, and it's a great way to learn from peers in other areas across the country to get your questions answered, to make connections. So we encourage you to join that community as well. Sign up for our newsletter and our mailing list to stay up to date, our advocacy network. And this is us. This is our early childhood team. I know I went through everything very quickly, and I apologize for having a tickle in my throat as well, but there will be time for questions and answers after our presentations today, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I just put your email address in the chat as well, and we really appreciate the national context that you've provided, which I think will really set the stage nicely. And thank you for showing how Ohio stacks up, as well as some action items that we can use moving forward. So really appreciate your willingness to stick around to answer some Q&A at the conclusion of the webinar. And I will just keep things moving right along with Amanda Wilson from Coalition on Homelessness and Housing in Ohio. Amanda is the youth director, and she has a presentation. You might see a few things that are resonant from the national perspective that we're also seeing in Ohio as well. And I'll turn it right over to her, and I'll continue to just put some of the resources in the chat as we go. Thanks, Amanda.
Thanks so much. Hi. Again, Amanda Wilson, Youth Housing Initiative Director at Ohio. I was able to take a peek at the registration list and know that I have some friends hopefully on the call, as well as some new folks. I am going to move through the content kind of quickly, like Sarah did, so that we can have time for questions. But as was mentioned, you'll get the slides later, and you can always reach out to me with questions. So I am going to attempt to get my screen shared. Do you guys have the right one?
Yeah, it looks great.
All right, great. So I'm going to talk about early childhood homelessness, but to talk about that, I'm also going to talk a lot about family homelessness and what the housing picture looks like in our state. So just a little bit about Ohio. We're a statewide advocacy organization, but we also do so much more, including a lot of training and technical assistance, and my program, the Youth Housing Initiative, which I'll talk about more in a little bit. So some of this data may be familiar to you if you've had a chance to go to one of our Ohio in Your Community presentations, but I felt it was important to go through and just talk a little bit about the housing picture in Ohio. So what's really important to note is just that we have a lot of need around housing in our community, and it's just not affordable. So our state housing wage is $20.81. And those of you who are in urban areas know, as it says on the chart, that those numbers can be a lot higher. So that means working 80 hours a week at minimum wage to afford a 2-bedroom apartment, which is not sustainable. So this is a table of the most common jobs in Ohio, and as you can see, only 2 of them pay over that 2-bedroom housing wage. So this is really important to note because most people experiencing homelessness are working. So it's a common misconception, and I know we're focused on early childhood, but again, most young folks are experiencing homelessness with their families. And so there's a common misconception that people experiencing homelessness are not working, which is not true. A lot of folks are working and experiencing homelessness because of the lack of affordable housing. Rents are going up. Evictions are rising. As you can see, we had a big dip when there was eviction protection, and then as that went away, evictions are going up. So in 2023, homelessness actually didn't increase as much in Ohio as it did nationally, which is good news. However, there's still a lot of problems, which I just talked about, the winding down of pandemic related resources, rent increases, And as you can see that as we look at what's been going up and what's been going down, I wanted to point out that veterans homelessness has been decreasing. And the reason it's been decreasing is because there's been a big commitment to a financial investment nationally to reduce and eliminate veteran homelessness. So homelessness and housing and affordability are policy choices. They are not inevitable. They are not unsolvable. It's really about getting the will to end homelessness for everyone, including our babies and young children. So I did want to mention a program that is actually not under the Youth Housing Initiative, but it is really special that CoHio manages, which is the Healthy Beginnings at Home program. And some of you may be familiar with this program. It is in a few urban centers around the state. And so what this project has been looking at is birth outcomes when we get pregnant people experiencing homelessness housed. And the outcomes, as you can imagine, have been very good. Housing stability helps pregnant people have healthy babies. And so this is an advocacy opportunity. So we would need to advocate always for affordable housing and living wages. And we also need to be advocating for funding for programs like Healthy Beginnings at Home that have proven to have positive outcomes for, pregnant people, young children experiencing homelessness. So I wanted to talk a little bit about my program, the Youth Housing Initiative. So we provide training, education, and technical assistance to youth dedicated homeless services and housing providers. So just wanted you all to understand a little bit about what we do and how it fits into the larger picture. So we focus on advocacy, collaboration, technical assistance, and training. If you have a need around training relative to preventing and ending youth homelessness, please reach out to us. We like to get out into the community and do training and do technical assistance and provide support. We're currently funded by two state and a state contract, a state grant, and a federal grant that we actually just got for the youth homelessness systems improvement. Again, I know I saw some folks registered on the call are part of this effort. So the youth homelessness systems improvement grant is through HUD, and it's allowing us to seek, allowing us to seek systems improvement around the state. And so if you want to know more about that and how to get involved, you can reach out to me. We also provide training and technical assistance and some data support for the Ohio Department of Health Youth Homelessness Program. And then we provide training and technical assistance through development to youth homelessness and housing providers around the state. We're always looking for partners and collaborators to get involved. So again, this is some data that you've already seen from Sarah, but just emphasizing, that we have thousands of young children experiencing homelessness, and it's unacceptable. Housing is a human right, and it's important that we work together to make sure that everyone is getting housed. So Sarah talked a little bit about the impacts. Those delays. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the trauma of homelessness. So experiencing homelessness is traumatic. It's traumatic for kids and it's traumatic for adults. And so I know some of you who are providers are probably already familiar with a lot of this information, but there's a lot of symptoms that young folks can exhibit based on experiencing housing instability and homelessness and other traumatic events. So across the spectrum of physical, emotional, behavioral, and neurological. So when we think about what Sarah was saying about education and the importance of education and wraparound services, it's an identification. It's really critical that both on the housing side and the education side, that folks connecting with these young children, school-age children and their families are familiar with what these impacts of trauma are and can help provide those supports to mitigate the traumatic impact and help students and young children achieve success. So we talked about health outcomes a little bit already in the previous presentation, but the longer a child experiences homelessness, the greater the cumulative toll on their health and well-being. We also know that experiencing homelessness as a young child makes you more likely to experience homelessness as an adult. So it's really critical that we intervene, identify and intervene early to make sure that we're mitigating those negative impacts and trying to pause the cycle of experiencing homelessness. So we talked a little bit about educational outcomes and achievement gaps, and we know that those educational outcomes impact earnings potential, impact success and application later on in life. And so just important to get, again, highlighting the youth data, important to get young folks into high quality early childhood programming as quickly as possible. So I realized I went through my content really quickly, but there's some things that I want to leave you with and just reiterate. Just checking my notes. But again, the math isn't mathing. There is not enough affordable housing units for everyone who needs them. There are not affordable wages for people to afford housing. And we have to look at the whole family, not just young children. Families are vulnerable, and especially looking for families who need like a 3 to 4 bedroom, it is really difficult. And I think Sarah mentioned this also, but your ability to find housing and have enough bedrooms can impact keeping your children in the home, and them not being put in placement through child welfare. A study in Georgia found that the most common reason of removal in that state was lack of stable housing. And that's really unacceptable because the inability to afford housing is a systemic problem. It is not an individual failing. And that's really important that we work as advocates to shift that narrative. I know I said this before, but we have to choose as a community. We have to choose affordable housing. We have to choose policy decisions that move away from continuing to allow young children, babies, families, individuals to be experiencing homelessness. And there will be some additional state level data hopefully coming out soon from Ohio Housing Finance Agency. They have a statewide data warehouse of homelessness and housing services data and some other data from around the state. And they're in the process of doing a report that will provide more detail around what's happening in our state around housing and homelessness. So I think that is all the key points that I wanted to hit. I know we're going to take questions. And I'm looking forward to continuing to provide you with information about Cohio and the Youth Housing Initiative and what we're doing to prevent and end homelessness in Ohio.
Thank you so much, Amanda. I have had the pleasure of working with your team in advocacy over the last decade, and we have such strong advocates at Cohio, really focused on housing insecurity, homelessness intervention, and all of these data trends that you're seeing. And of course, it's really alarming to us to see the family numbers continue to increase despite overall decrease. So really appreciate you sharing that in greater context and what funding has done for other targeted populations like veterans. And just thank you for your time today, and thank you for sticking around a little bit too, as we'll transition to Christina here in a second, and would appreciate your time at the Q&A at the end, Amanda. Thank you. All right, I'm going to introduce Christina Walls, Managing Director of Education at the YWCA of Columbus. Thank you for joining us, Christina. And I am going to stick on camera for 1 second just while we make sure that these slides work. Do they look okay for folks? Let me see if I can get 2 monitors going. Sometimes that trips things up. Let me go ahead and share screen. Here we go. Did the slides look okay for everybody? Are they in? Here, we'll put them in.
You go back.
No. Okay, perfect. I'm going to go off camera now, Christina, and whoops, it moved forward. Okay.
There we go.
Thank you. I'll turn it right over to you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Brittany. Hello, everyone. Thank you again, Groundwork, for sharing this space with some amazing leaders in our community. Also, we thank you at YWCA for allowing us to be a voice for our community with housing insecurity amongst young children that we face every single day. My name is Christina Walls. I am the Managing Director of Education here at the YWCA. I just want to talk a little bit. I know we've heard a lot of great data around this discussion. I do want to take a different approach and just do a little shift. And I want to tell you a little bit today about what this looks like from the eyes of a child. Some of us are programs that are working with children in this population. I want to share that with you a little bit. But first, I want to talk to you about what our mission is here at the YWCA. YWCA Columbus is dedicated to eliminating racism, empowering women, and promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. We do this through a few of our programs. One is education, another was housing, and also through our social justice and our advocacy programs. So with more than 30 years experience, the YWCA provides within our programs, we service Franklin County and also Delaware County, but we provide affordable, dependable, high quality childcare programs for before and after school children. And also we have a traditional childcare program that's housed inside of our family center here in Columbus, Ohio. We service 1,200 plus children and growing. All of our programming there, as you see, as we talk about some of the barriers for young children, we make sure that our programs are created and we're able to provide this program that is choice-based learning for children, supporting their social emotional learning, physical fitness opportunities, STEAM-based activities, and also community service projects. So this is where I really want to park and talk a little bit. We have a lot of similar information. We all are aware of what we're faced with, this task at hand that is, a major epidemic here in Ohio, across the nation, and that is families that are facing homelessness, children that are facing housing insecurities. Many of our children every day are waking up each morning with adult worries. We know what it's like for us to be a little bit stretched and stressed out, how difficult it is for us to maneuver through our day. But for young children waking up every single morning, they cannot process for one moment, leaving this overwhelming feeling is leaving them feeling hopeless, not knowing what tomorrow or what the day is going to end like. And of course, we discussed earlier with both of the other leaders, types of challenges that come along with this. Academic, I'm going to paint a different canvas for you. Academically, as a child steps into a classroom amongst their peers, all the way from, we're looking at infants up to school-age children, they're behind, they're struggling. because we know that their minds are not on academics. It's on surviving the moment, surviving the day. Our children are not having the opportunity to live. They're surviving. Every day they're in survival mode. It affects their social emotional behavior. Many things that social emotionally, they're, struggling with emotional trust. Can I trust the people around me? So many things have changed in my life during this moment of being without a home. Also, challenging themselves with self-regulation. A lot of children that we experience in our programs are struggling with self-regulation. This is their voice. This is the way that they express themselves. But immediately, some of us who are not fully trained are struggling with managing and help supporting children with behavioral issues in classroom settings. Also, we look at health and wellness. As we talked a little bit earlier, their health is at risk. Their well-being is at risk. Also, there's a shortage of clothing and just everyday, day-to-day supplies. Now, imagine this. I want to park here for a second. When we look at children and families that are facing a homeless situation, many of them are coming into programs such as our family center that is located on 900 Harvard Court. They walk into the building with trauma. They're coming from a situation where they may have experienced physical abuse, sexual abuse. It could be something to where they already were evicted. Money is tight. Things that they typically need that we may have or others may have, they just don't have it to sustain their everyday living, which now this is trauma coming into the program. Once they enter into the shelter, that's trauma on top of trauma. Now they're dealing in an environment where there's no privacy, okay? They are looking at their past failures, feeling as if they failed at something. And it's our job to make sure they don't feel as if they are their experience. What their experience is not who they are. They just need a moment of support to regather things, to get back on their feet, and to begin to try to live again. So a lot of these children who are coming into our programs, if we go through a day, they walk into a space that is reserved for them as they enter into a shelter. Shelter care is so important in their transition in getting back stable or finding a home within our cities or even in Columbus. But when they walk into their space, it is typically a 10 by 10 or 10 by 12 room with 2 beds. Your entire family is housed in this location. From getting dressed every single morning, where they left a home where they were able to wake up with a roof over their head, a bed to sleep in, a TV to watch, and to actually have privacy every single day, to now moving to a community environment. Children who have been taught stranger danger now has to cope with going against what they were taught, to say, now I have to be in a space with people I don't know. I have to get dressed in community restrooms with people I don't know. I have to sit and have a family style meal with people I don't know. And with their little feet, they walk about 25 steps and they see the sign that says Safe and Sound. Safe and Sound is our internal child care program that services our children in our community shelter. Even though we are a 5-star program, those children walk through those doors. And imagine yourself at the airport when you have your luggage. And we know sometimes when we go on vacations, we fill our suitcases with as much as we can so we can make sure we survive on our vacations. But these children are carrying their own suitcases full of life's issues. They're children and our adults, even in older adulthood, older adults are struggling with managing the stress from day-to-day living. But now our children are having to struggle with every single day-to-day living. As they enter into their programs, even though we are providing all the amazing education, we are doing great programming, we're having fun, we're going outside, all the great things that these providers are providing in their childcare settings, it is difficult for children to focus in on what's created for them to sustain, to grow, to learn, to be happy, to love. These things are all stifled, and there's the barrier of, I don't know what happens when I leave from here. They move from classroom to classroom. Some of the things that we experience are the emotional setbacks, academic setbacks. A lot of our children are not meeting benchmarks or standards when it comes to assessments, when it comes to testing, when it comes to just being engaged in a classroom setting. The one thing that's on their mind is, am I going to eat when I get out of here? Am I going to have a roof over my head? Is my mom going to be stressed out? And that's where a lot of times the physical abuse comes in, and children begin to take on the stress of their families because they cannot manage something that we take for granted sometimes, and that's having a roof over their head. Affordable housing, it should not be an option. It should be, it's a must. Families are now having a difficult time even getting rehoused because of prior convictions, because they couldn't afford the place that they were in. Just something as simple as a single mother having 4 children, not being able to even afford a 2-bedroom apartment. So as we mentioned earlier, there's so many challenges that our children face, behavioral. Their only voice is sometimes to act out in the classrooms. And it is up to us as the providers, as a community, to step up and be able to support these children and these families the best we can. Health and wellness, they get it there for that moment. But what happens when they leave these programs? What happens with the clothing? Children not feeling depression, feeling overwhelmed, feeling anxiety at age 2, 3, 4 years old, expressing that, even feeling it as an infant. Go to the next slide. Some of the programming that we do as Safe and Sound for children who are facing homelessness, we provide care for the public and for parents receiving care at the YWCA Family Center. We also provide a safe environment that is supportive of services and resources for children in this situation. Some of the things that we provide to help support as much as we can: quality curriculum and programming, developmental assessments, nutritious meals, kindergarten readiness, speech and hearing assessments. I want to park right there for one quick second. As some of the children have come in, even this past week, we partnered with Columbus Speech and Hearing. We tested 10 children. 9 of the children did not pass the hearing component. We tested in another 10 children for speech. 4 passed, 5 did not pass. Listen, we really as a community have to lend an ear. We got to move it from hearing and planning to manifesting what is necessary and needed for our children and our families to be successful. Because what we're experiencing as a provider in our programs, we're providing quality care, but we also need to be able to have another plan when they get out of the situation that's sustainable. In our programs, 98% of our teachers are degreed and credentialed. Early Start program for preschoolers with the City of Columbus, that's in play for our children who are also preschoolers. But also ensuring that our teachers, our staff, are prepared with trauma-informed care trainings, but also creating a trust-based intervention. When children are in this situation, it's hard for them to trust the next person or the next face that they see. It's hard for them to trust their environment. But I'm going to tell you, after the end of the day, when children leave our programs, on their mind, they've thought about this all day long, and they step foot out into, again, their little feet going in 25 steps away into their home, temporary home. And it's the most heart-wrenching thing that we can see. But we here on this call, on this Zoom, we have voices. We have the ability to reach out and support. We can reach out to our state legislators. We can make an impact, but what has to happen? Gentrification is happening right now in our communities. And it's displacing a lot of our children and our families. Remember, this is not just an adult problem. Our children are struggling immensely, and they don't know how to, with their young minds, handle and process adult stresses. So please, if you're on this call today, there's so many ways that you can help support our community and our children that are facing homelessness. Here at the YWCA, we do have programs that are in place at our family center, our women's residency, as well as our educational programs that help support a lot of our children that are facing homelessness. But you can also donate to programs such as ours. This helps with us providing resources. This helps with us also providing supplies. A lot of our families there need diapers, clothing, shoes, some of the things that we sometimes take for granted each day that we just utilize. Please, if you're in the community and you see shelters that are in your area, please donate. We look for those, but that's how a lot of times we're running our programs. And we're also looking for sustainable funding so we can continue to support our families and get them transitioned to proper housing. I thank you all so much for your time. I really hope that you heard these messages today. You heard the data. You heard, you were able to see some of the, great things that was prepared today. But I think if we could just walk away knowing that our children are our future leaders, and if they cannot process life right now, we have great work to do. And it starts with affordable housing and livable wages. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Christina. I am trying to figure out my screen share. I'm a geriatric millennial and it takes me a minute sometimes. I really appreciate that you brought the day-to-day lived experience of the children that are at the heart of this conversation to mind. So thank you for painting that picture of what that looks like for them and for their families as well. I would love, we have a few minutes left. We've got about 8 minutes and I want to make sure we make the most of everybody's time. So I'd love to invite Amanda and Sarah back on screen. I have a feeling we will have some questions. Folks, if you would like to raise your hand, I can call on you, or if you want to put your name in the chat, Q&A in the chat, I can do that as well. Want to make sure we've got time for folks to ask questions about all this great content that we just heard from our wonderful speakers. Let's see. All right. I'm still sharing my screen. Thank you. There's a big red button. You would think I could. All right, Connie, I am going to hit allow to talk. So hopefully you'll be able to connect and unmute and ask your question. Hi, Connie.
Oh,
You should be. Yeah, we can hear you now.
I actually don't have a question.
Oh.
It's just that my mouse was just clicking on everything. And why I can't click and I forgot. It's a webinar. Okay.
No worries. No worries. Thank you. All right. Well, while folks are thinking, I would love to ask Amanda or Sarah, anybody, what do you think is the reason? I know you touched on this a little bit, but if we could dive a little deeper, the note around the overall homelessness in Ohio decreasing, but family homelessness ticking up. Do we have reasons or data that we can point to as to why that's the case? I know there was data around increased funding supporting specific other populations, but are there reasons that family homelessness is ticking up?
I could definitely do some more digging to get some like exact data, but I think it has to do with a lot of the things that we've all been talking about in terms of how families are struggling, and that it's a whole picture. And I think that, and this isn't a way to deflect, but like there's a lot of ideas about what homelessness looks like. A lot of people picture an urban area. They picture a middle-aged white man with substance use issues holding a sign, and certainly that is something. But families are living in their cars, they're doubled up, they are and so I really think it has to do with the lack of affordable housing and sustainable wages. But I could always do a little more digging if people want more information, and they can follow up.
Thanks, Amanda. We have a question in the chat from Gwyneth. We know Governor DeWine is very focused on children. How can we leverage that focus into creating state supports for priority in early childhood education access? It looks like, Sarah, they reference your presentation and how in the 4 focus areas, Ohio is not hitting the mark in 3 out of the 4 focus areas for early childhood programming among homeless youth. So I don't know if you've seen success in other states, or if other speakers, feel free to chime in on how we can best leverage that keen focus on Ohio's youngest kiddos right now in that space.
Oh, were you going to say something, Sarah?
Go ahead. You go ahead. You go first.
Well, just briefly, I just think that elevating the issue of housing and affordability and instability and homelessness, that there has been an emphasis on early childhood education, which is great. And but like housing affordability and the issue of homelessness isn't always the context, the connection isn't always made. And it really needs to be, because so I think advocacy, working with your partners, working in your local community to just really like highlight these housing issues, and that we can't look at early childhood success, school readiness, all of these things without understanding the issue of homelessness and housing instability that that a significant proportion of that population is facing.
I think, Amanda, I'm going to piggyback off of what you just said. I take working with this population every single day. It's hard to talk about education without a home. Okay. It's hard to talk about things that are norms to us when you don't have a place to lay your head every night. Okay. So in order to address and support education, we first have to support families having a place to live and reside. Because even though our children are coming to school, even when they're in shelters, they're not holistically there. They're taken, I mentioned earlier, they feel that stress. They see that stress from their parents, from their family, their mom, their dad. And this is one thing that sits and burdens them in a setting of education. So when we look at lower test scores, when we look at assessments that things are not being met, some of the metrics are not being met, they're not going to be until we fix the bigger problem. And that is they're spending their day worried about the things that they cannot control as children. So are they really learning in that day? They're not. So I again, until we can get to a place where there is affordable housing, families need livable wages to sustain affordable housing, for our children to wake up every single morning, catch the school bus like the rest of the children in the world, get on, be able to have good meals, nutritious meals at home to eat, so they can go to school and learn without worry, without stress, without stretching their little minds into places that they don't understand. And when they're able to do that, they can sit and absorb and receive everything that's been taught to them, because now their minds are not jumbled with, am I going to eat? Will I have clothing? Is my mother okay? She was crying this morning. We're packing up our things. We're now having to move to somewhere else where I don't know anyone and I don't know how this works. Because most of their days, by the time they get to the program, they're crying, they're going through separation anxiety, they're having distress, they're dealing with depression, and they're just trying to simply get through the day to do this all over again. We have to see this. Again, as I mentioned and stressed earlier, these are our children and our future leaders for tomorrow. And until we can address the homeless dilemma that we have right now, and again, talking, planning, but now putting in the work and making things happen and work for our families that don't have a home or a place to call home.
Needs to be a top priority. Thank you, Christina. We have a couple questions left and there's a little bit of overlap in them. I realize it's noon, but if the speakers don't mind hanging on for maybe like another 90 seconds to 2 minutes, I'm going to try to consolidate them into one question. There's someone with lived experience who notes we're talking about increases and decreases in population, and yet they're seeing some of the same people also experiencing homelessness alongside them. So maybe so holding that in mind, there's also a question. We referenced the Ohio Housing Finance Authority data earlier in the presentation. I think Amanda did. Somebody wants to know, is there another data source in Ohio that we can use that can be bolstered? So I think it's a question of, can we speak to, are there other data sources we should be using? And why are a little bit more around the fluctuation and perhaps how chronic homelessness might be fitting into the conversation around families experiencing housing insecurity. I'll leave it open for whoever wants to jump in.
I mean, there's a lot of data. There's a lot of data out there. Not that we don't need more. The challenge is that it is homelessness is defined differently by different agencies, like different federal programs. And so it can be difficult to get a good data picture. But the homelessness and housing systems required to collect data. So that's some of what goes into the OFA data. The schools are collecting data, which Sarah talked about. So yes, there's data out there, and it's about, I think, improving and collaborating between the different sources. I didn't know if anyone else, I can also talk about chronic and cyclical homelessness, but I wanted to create space in case anyone else wanted to say anything about the data.
Amanda, I could share this. Again, I come from a different standpoint. I want to shed the light on an example here at at the family center. Our average time frame should be 27 days that a family is sitting in the shelter. That is now tripled. This is recent. These are numbers that I just this morning spoke to our director at our family center. I said, what are the barriers with this? Many of our families are coming in with evictions. So by the time they're going to apply for a new place, they're getting denied. It's making it very difficult because of the standards, the way the system is set up. If you have a prior eviction, you're getting immediate denial. So it's keeping our families in the shelters triple the time that it should. These numbers are increasing. And until we can figure out and maybe adjust some of the requirements, giving additional support, financial support, whatever that may look like. But I did want to share to you, what's happening right now, shelter-wise. Families' average times should be around 27 days, no more than 30 days, but we're pressing now triple that amount of time, almost.
And I think, high rates of recidivism for people experiencing homelessness, that is unfortunately common across the country. That's not just something that we see in Ohio. And I think that speaks to what we already mentioned here today, that it's certainly a housing issue. It's certainly a systemic issue, but it's why providing other supports and services and access to education is also key. And what we've seen in other states, we've seen great success with statewide coalitions, truly just different systems that are serving the same population, young children experiencing homelessness. So it can be nonprofits, shelter providers, early childhood education providers, pediatricians, and they just form a coalition, either in a city or statewide. And their goal is to advocate and to change policy. There's a group called Yay Babies in North Carolina that does that really well. And I'm in Philadelphia, and I've been a part of groups that have done that both in Philadelphia and across Pennsylvania. So always happy to talk about that work further and what that can look like in Ohio too. But yeah, we've seen success with groups like that across the country.
Thank you so much, Sarah, Christina, Amanda. I appreciate that you've painted a picture in depth of what this crisis looks like for our young families and beyond. And I think that's a great note to end on, Sarah, around some success stories around coalition building at the local and statewide level, and would love to keep the conversation going. For everybody on this chat, you've got our info, you've got the speaker's info now. So please, let's keep this conversation going beyond this webinar, and appreciate you sticking around for a couple extra minutes, and we'll get this recording out to everybody and hope we can all stay engaged and continue working on this together. Thank you, ladies. Take care.